Hey everybody, I'm Michelle Crawford with Michelle Crawford Watercolor. Thought I would go live today and finally unbox the second set of these Shiyun Paul Rubens watercolors that my husband got me for my birthday. He's kind of amazing. So I'm going to unbox these. I did unbox the first set. I don't know which set is number one and number two, but the first one that I got was this one. So these 6 colors, which were gorgeous. When I post this live to my channel, I'll go ahead and put a link there for this video if you want to check out these. But I'm going to go ahead and unbox the second set and add them to my little ceramic palette here where I put the first. So I have found Paul Rubens watercolor products probably a year or so ago, and I love the quality of their products. I tend to use, other high quality products, and the price difference for the Paul Rubens is always great, especially their watercolor paper. And so, I really was interested by the granulating watercolors that they have. This was a really great set. And what's fantastic about these is they can be very, very light, but they layer really well and they granulate. So there's lots of great textures and you get that great characteristic of watercolor from these. What I really loved doing with these was painting like monochromatic, because they really did layer really well, and almost all of them would layer all the way to a very, very dark color, almost black, as far as darkness in the color. So I'm hoping and expecting kind of the same thing from this set, and 6 new colors. And they also, I think, have another watercolor medium in there, so we'll check that out as well. So here we go. I'm going to open up the box. They always come in the most beautiful packaging. I remember when I got the first box, I was surprised at how big the package was. And I think I was expecting for the price that they would be the small tubes, but these are 15 milliliter tubes, so that's fantastic. They should last a very, very long time, and always beautiful packaging by Paul Rubens. Got a nice insert here that has more information about the paints, mostly in Chinese, so I can't exactly read that for you. But if you flip it over, there's also some more nice artwork, so always great packaging from Paul Rubens. No difference here. And here are the 6 colors of paint. And I mentioned we got 6 tubes here, and then there's this watercolor medium, which came with this. It didn't come with the other set. Not sure why, but it's supposed to help with the fluidity of the watercolor, so we're going to test that out as well. So the colors in this set, again, these are beautiful colors, great for layering, and you can tell that they've been mixing pigments, and that's why they granulate so well. So the first color is a dark blue-green, dark blue and green. We've also got a purple and black. I think that's going to be gorgeous. Purple and blue, looks very, very bright color. Got blue and dark green here, blue and green, and then purple and pink. So again, I can't exactly match these up. I guess they do have the pigment numbers on them. So this first one is 121, the dark blue and green. So before I swatch these or paint anything with these, I will paint a flower here on the live today, just to test these out. But first I'm going to go ahead and put them in my ceramic palette. This was, oh gosh, another gift from my husband, this little tiny palette. I thought it was adorable, and when I got the first set of paints, I didn't really have any room in my regular palette, so I thought this was a great place to put these. Don't need a lot of paint with these for sure, so I had put in the first 6, and now we'll just fill the rest of this palette up with these other 6. This part does tend to get a little bit messy. I have tried to perfect the way to open a tube of watercolor paint without getting watercolor paint everywhere. Haven't quite perfected that yet, but they tend to kind of squeeze out immediately, but didn't really have that happen here. I'm just going to fill up this little spot here. Didn't do so bad. It's definitely the green, the blue green, number 121. Okay, this next one here, number 171. This is, so we have dark blue and green, and then this is blue and green. So I just put the 121 in, now we're going to go for the 171. I do tend to let my paints dry and paint with them. I'll go ahead and swatch these while they're still wet. But I have been watching a lot of artists recently that use watercolor straight from the tube, and it seems like you get a lot more variation in what you can do with different textures and things like that. So I might give that a try sometime. So 151, this is the purple and black. So let's put this in the palette here. We will test out all of these colors, just getting them unboxed and loaded into my ceramic palette. Alright, so the next one is number 161. Ooh, this is the purple blue. I think this color is going to be really gorgeous. It separates into two very vibrant colors. Ooh, and it's even vibrant coming right out of the tube. Look at that. I'm going to paint a flower after I swatch these and try to do some like layered monochromatic flower. I'm thinking for the majority of it, I'll probably use this purple and blue, and then for the shadows, I might use this purple and black. I think that might be really interesting. Technically using two pigments, but you know, both kind of in the same purple family. Anyway, let's get back to unboxing these. So the next one is color 152. This is the purple and pink. It also looks like a very vibrant color. Let's see what that looks like out of the tube. Looks pretty dark, but again, what I love about these, at least the first set I've tried of these, is they get really dark, they layer really well, and so you can get really light washes, really vibrant kind of mid-tone washes, and then really dark, almost, you know, black colors would be. So perfect for monochromatic painting, perfect for adding texture to any of your artworks, or even if you want to use a dark in your painting and you don't want to, you know, go with a Payne's gray or something like that. All right, so now they're all in the palette. Now the fun part begins. We're going to swatch these. And then this medium here, I've not used it before. And it doesn't really have too much information about it, but it says it's Oxgal fluid, or Oxgal liquid, and it's supposed to increase the paint's fluidity, enhance the adhesion and uniform color mixing, giving you a more professional experience. So on the sheet it says, you know, when they granulate, this is with the ox fluid, so I'm guessing it helps it kind of blend a little bit. We'll give that a try. But for now, let's just go ahead and swatch these colors. So I've got a sheet of paper here. I like these little small watercolor pads. I use like a scrap sheet of paper or a small sheet of paper when I'm painting, so I can test out my colors. And the size comes in really handy for that. All right, and similar to what we did here, I'm going to go ahead and swatch these and try to show the transparency and also as dark as they can go. So we'll try to kind of replicate what we did on the first set. Alrighty, move this out of the way and we'll give these a go. I just have a round watercolor brush here. This is a number 6 round from my Lefebvre Craftamo brush set. And a clean jar of water. Alright, so we're going for the first one here, which I believe was the dark blue and green. Just need a very tiny amount. Ooh, it's pretty on the palette. I'll go ahead and swatch this. You can see it layers so dark. It's a very pretty green, very natural green. I'm just going to add some water to my brush as I swatch these and see how transparent we can get them. That way when I look at my swatch card, I can also see the variation I can get with this color. And we may even do a second layer on these swatches. I did that last time and ended up getting those really dark values. And so it was really interesting to see, even as you layer these on top of one another, how dark that they could go. But also, again, very light values as well. So there's the green, the dark blue green. Next is number 171. That was the blue and green. So this is the not so dark version. Looks, resembles a little bit of a hooker green. Again, these are supposed to granulate and separate, and so you can see already in that first swatch it's starting to make some really interesting texture, which I think it's going to be really exciting to add to my paintings. So go in with some more water here, get that mid-tone, and then really rinse off my brush to see as light as these can go. Well, I love that. Two really beautiful greens to add to the palette. I only got one green in the last palette, and you know, I don't think that this is a set that you would like do your whole piece with, but together, like, I think I'm adding a lot of variation to what we got in the first set. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is number 151, the purple and black. Kind of excited about this color. I wonder if it's going to be kind of like a moon glow from Daniel Smith. Although I think that one granulates with blue and purple. This is very pretty. It reminds me a little bit of the Misty Carmine from the last set, but maybe leans a little bit more purple. Again, I will do a second layer on these so we can see just how dark they can be layered. Just how light that can go. All right. What a gorgeous color. All right, so let's go to the next one, which is 161. This is the purple and blue. Oh wow, it's just so vibrant. I know it's going to be beautiful. And I can't wait to see how it separates. So it's very creamy, very opaque going on the paper. I'm already starting to see a little bit of the pink separate. I don't know if you can see that on camera. Wow, this is super, super vibrant color. I don't know how light fast these are. I'll have to research that. Paul Rubens paints seem to be pretty professional grade. Another gorgeous color. It's also like a jewel tone. Again, can't wait to see how it might separate. I can see it starting to happen here. Beautiful. All right, the next one is 172. This is the blue and dark green. No, this is 152. My apologies. The purple and pink. Very pretty, like a magenta-y kind of color. And this one should separate it also into separate purple and pink hues. Very pretty color. And our last one should be 172, the blue and dark green. However, I think I got them out of order. I'll have to correct that in my palette later. Here we go, we'll put it on the palette here. Ooh, that's beautiful. Like an aqua. Wow. It's so rich of a color. Although this does not look really anything like the color on the website. I don't know if it's the view it on the screen. I really expected this to be more of a blue, but it's definitely more of an aqua. I don't know if I needed to maybe mix the tube of paint a little bit. Try that again. Yeah, definitely more of an aqua. You can see it's like very, very different from what I was expecting, based on the information on the website. So I don't know if it was the wrong color in the box or if just the picture was off, but still very, very pretty color. Definitely able to use that in many of my paintings. Okay, well there we are, our 6 colors. Now, as I said, I want to really test these out. I'm going to go ahead and paint something with them. And actually, before I do that, I want to test out the medium that came with this, the Ox fluid. So, just a liquid. I don't know if I was supposed to dip my brush in here or mix it with the paint, but so I've got a clean brush. Just going to dip in there a little bit, and got this blue-green color here. Let me just see what it does. Really feels like I'm getting much more even wash with the fluid. I'm going to go ahead and just try without. Expect it will like granulate more without the fluid versus with. And that does seem to be what's happening. I'm definitely getting 2 very different granulating effects here. Just going to go in for a little bit more pigment so I can kind of match the values with these 2 swatches. Yeah, it definitely seems to move more, blend better with the fluid, and much more granulated without. But I think if you're buying these colors, you're probably really interested in the granulating effects. So I don't know, we'll keep that handy. Find a good use for it. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and paint a flower. So the last time that I unboxed these, I ended up really falling in love with the Misty Carmine color, and I did a flower. I'll post that video in the description when this live goes onto my channel as well. And so I want to do something similar. I really liked just this close-up flower, and they're, again, like really great for monochromatic painting. That's maybe thinking I'm doing that with 2-tone. So I found this beautiful picture of a close-up flower, probably some type of rose, on Pixabay, and I just went ahead and sized it for my canvas and then kind of recolored it a little bit. So this is kind of what I'm going for with these layering paints. I think it's going to be really pretty. And as far as colors, I was kind of thinking that I would do some of this purplish color with some of the black purple. And let's go ahead and grab that black purple again, just to see how dark it's going to layer that second time. I'm hoping I can get my darkest darks. Oh yeah, with this really dark purple. I think that'll be gorgeous. See right out of the tube. Yeah, so between those 2 colors, I think we can paint a really cool flower. So I've got my palette here. Typically when I'm doing different washes and different darknesses, I might use a palette that I can mix those in together. And so let me grab one of those. And again, we'll be using 2 colors, but and we'll also be doing some layering. But let me grab a palette momentarily. I think I actually still have a little bit of the Misty Carmine in here from when I painted that last flower. So let's go ahead and we've got it in here. I want to let this palette dry. So I'll actually put that aside, and then we'll grab the tube of paint and put that right into our palette over here. So it's this one, and grab the right one, 152. Yep, that is the pink purple. So that's this color, and so I want the 161, which we have right here, and so also 151, the purple black. And then I'll go ahead and put just a little blob of each of these in my palette here. So I'll also need a fresh jar of water. And first I'm going to want to transfer this image to my watercolor paper. You can either just draw your image with a pencil or trace it onto a sheet of paper. I'm using a watercolor block today, and I've already pre-cut the paper to my block, and I'm going to go ahead and tape my edges, even though I am using a watercolor block today, just because I like to have that nice clean white edge. Really helps your artwork really shine through off the white page. And so I am going to use some graphite paper and a stylus to go ahead and transfer my image to my watercolor paper. So in order to do this, I just kind of use graphite paper and I fold it in on itself so it doesn't make a mess when you touch it. I save them like this. You can use them multiple times. I like to use graphite paper that's wax free. Make sure it's graphite and not carbon, because you're going to want to be able to erase. So I've got that, and then you can either use a stylus or just a pencil to trace it. I think today I'll just go ahead and use a pencil. And then you're also going to want to have some tape, so you can tape down your paper so it doesn't move while you're doing this. That's also really important. And before I actually go ahead and actually I think I'll tape after. Okay, so I'm going to tape my edges, but I'm actually going to trace my image first, or transfer it rather, and then put my tape on. And I've also trimmed this so it fits, again, perfectly on my paper. Since I'm using a block, I can just tape it across the top. And so I'm not going to like transfer every single thing that you see here. I'm more going to outline the image and the areas where I want to make sure I have a reference for when I'm painting. So anywhere there's a hard edge, for example, see around this petal here, you see that hard edge or a color change. And so you see that hard edge, and then you see this mid-tone purple, and then you see the highlight part that's completely white. We'll leave that completely white in our painting. And so I will want to make sure I draw those, and you can, since it's a very blurred line and not a hard edge, you could, make a dotted line, or we'll also keep a reference photo handy while we're working, so we can constantly look back and forth between our reference photo and our painting and make sure that it's looking how we want it to. So now that my image is taped down on top of my watercolor paper, I'm going to take my graphite paper, unfold it, and be careful at this point so you're not getting a lot of graphite on your hands. Also, be cognizant that, are mindful that when you push your hand on the paper, it's actually going to push through. So I do have one other item that I like to use to help in this instance, so I don't leave a lot of smudges on my paper. This is just an artist's bridge. This one's made out of acrylic, so you can see through it, which I think is really helpful. And I'm going to use this to just rest my hands so that I have a sturdy hand to transfer my image, but I'm not going to be like resting my hand on the paper and smudging the paper underneath. If you do smudge your paper, that's no big deal. It is graphite, so we're going to be able to erase it. It's not the end of the world. Just makes for a little bit quicker of a cleanup once we take off the image. Okay, so I like to start at the top and kind of work my way down, or you can start on the left and work your way right, just so that you're not having to go back over areas that you've already done and possibly like lose your place or end up with too many marks on your paper. So here you're just going to go ahead and trace right around all those hard edges, so we'll be able to see those underneath. I've got that down, and then I've got this kind of gradient here, so I'll just kind of do a little bit of a dash line, just to indicate that I'm going to do some blending there. And if I do lift up my paper underneath, you can see that the lines that I drew above have transferred through. The harder you press down, the darker the lines will be underneath. So keep that in mind. If you want to have a really light line and not having to do as much erasing, then a lighter hand will help with that. Or if you're not seeing your lines being pressed through the paper, that means maybe you just need to try to press a little bit harder as you do it. And so even there are places where it's just a soft edge. I'm just kind of marking where, again, some of those color transitions are happening. See right around that kind of dark area here, we've got kind of another color transition there. And here. And some hard and soft edges. Again, we're going to lighten this up, and you just want to make sure you have a guide, so your image is going to look similar to the reference image. If you're comfortable drawing, you could always just draw this part with your pencil right onto your paper and not have to worry about the transferring an image. But I want to make sure that everyone is able to get started, and so I often get excited about painting and want to get to the painting part, and tracing or transferring an image is really a way to help do that much more quickly, for me at least. So this helps me quite a bit. And just looking to mark any highlights for sure. It's, I think, one of the more difficult things with watercolor is learning how to leave the white of your paper. Sometimes to me, like, even if I do leave it successfully, it just feels a little unfinished, not having paint on all of the paper, which honestly, that's kind of silly, right? One of the beauties of watercolor is that it is transparent and translucent, and then when you want to have a nice white highlight, that can really shine through. So I want to get better at letting the white be there. I'm close to finished with my markings here. And I'm not coloring in any of the like shaded areas or anything like that, just kind of like marking where they start and end. And again, we're going to fill that in with paint. We don't need it to be like, you know, filling in a coloring page with our paintbrush. It's more just having a reference of where things are in your image. This is really important for portraits. If you ever trying to paint a portrait and it just doesn't look like the person, it can be really difficult to get proportions right and things and make sure that your portrait looks just like the person. So for that, like I always recommend being able to transfer a photograph, at least to like get a lot of those reference points of the shape of someone's face. Can be very, very helpful. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm close to having everything drawn in, but all I have to do to check is kind of lift my paper and go back and forth. I do see that there's both sides of this highlight I want to get. And I seem to be missing this edge. Got it. Okay. And again, I'm not going all the way to the edge of my paper because I'm going to put a tape border around it. We got most of our lines in. Sure, this is a nice hard edge. Sometimes you might have to go back over an area just because maybe you didn't press hard enough the first time. Okay, we'll still lighten them all up. So the goal is that you can see them for your reference, but they're not going to show through at the end of the day underneath your watercolor. Okay. Looks pretty good. I just want to make sure I get my transfer paper really close under that tape up here. It didn't seem to go through once I made it up top here. All right. Now to store this transfer paper, I'm just going to again fold it in on itself so that I don't get it all over and I can get some on my hands. I will try to wipe as much of that off as I can before I start to handle my paper because I don't want to end up with lots of paper smudgy hand marks and fingerprints all over my watercolor paper. Okay, so now we can remove the reference image and you can see that we have the pencil lines look just like we drew it with pencil from the graphite paper, all transferred here. But before I move forward, just to make sure that they're not going to all show through at the end of the painting, I like to use a kneaded eraser. This is an eraser that kind of feels like, I don't know, like silly putty or Play-Doh, but it's just malleable, which makes it really easy to just lift watercolor, so you don't want to erase everything. Maybe you did get some smudges here, like I did. When you rested your hand on your paper, it lifts those up really, really well. So I kind of go clean those up. And then some of the lines that are more dark, I'll lift those up a little bit as well. Again, you don't want to make them completely disappear, but if I were to see these ones up here are pretty dark, I don't want those to show through. So if I just kind of blot it with my eraser, it lightens it up, but make sure there's enough left behind that I'm going to be able to see it as I work. So I just put these watercolors on my palette. I'm super excited to see how beautiful they're going to be in this flower. And we're going to work with these two purples. And so I have this kind of purplish version of my reference photo, but again, I kind of altered it on my computer from Pixabay. So here's our reference. So it's not completely white. We're going to be a little bit interpretive with the way that we're painting this and just kind of make it stylized. But I think this is going to be really great with these layering watercolors because we're going to be able to get some really dark values and something I find really interesting with at least the last time I opened up a box of these paints, I found that these worked really well for, you know, kind of monochrome painting or just kind of layering one or two colors together since they do layer so well. Alright, so I'm almost got things lightened up just how I want it. Kind of going around making sure there's no like real dark parts or too many smudges left behind. Alright, I do want to have a nice white border around this painting, so I'm going to put some tape on before we jump into painting. Making sure I don't have any graphite left behind there. Okay. Let's go ahead and put on some tape. I'm using Holbein soft tape. I honestly found this through Let's Make Art. Sarah Cray use this second version of purple that we have in the set. So we just used this purple and blue, and now we're going to use the purple black. I think this is going to be really beautiful for some of these shadow areas. So, let's wet up the paint I put out here. Again, these are out of the tube, so they're still pretty creamy. I should be able to get a nice opaque, dark consistency right onto my brush. And I'm just going to start. I still have like can really well see my reference images or lines pretty well. They're not too dark. I'm just going to go ahead and start laying in that color where I see it. So starting up here and going put around the page. This is very, very, very dark. But I have a feeling that these are going to blend really beautifully with a little bit of water. So this being wet on wet, I think is going to help with that. I do have a bit of a hard edge here, so let's hope my paper's not too wet. And really just looking back at my reference image, even though I have the reference line there, kind of just going back and forth, making sure that what I'm putting down is kind of the same shape and the same value and color and darkness that and transparency that I'm seeing in my picture. So I know this, I want this to be darker. We might have to layer more on top of it, but I'm also kind of interested to see what would happen if I dropped in some of this other purple. It's also very opaque going on initially. Definitely still very vibrant on top of the other color, so I think this is a pretty opaque as well. That mixing those together, we might get a nice, beautiful dark value, and we did. Okay, so those are pretty hard edges except for right under here in my reference photo. So let's see how well we can blend these out. Again, the other purple seemed to stain, so I'm going to try to work quickly before they're really dry. We have a little bit of a lighter color coming down here. Just kind of fill in that shape. And drag down some of that color to create a soft blend and keep pulling our paint into other areas. Alright, so getting a lot of granulation here, which again is what you expected with this paint. But I'm also curious about using the medium that came in the box. Here is the Oxgall liquid. Let's see if that helps us stretch some of this paint and get maybe a little bit more even blend. And it does. And of course we have wet paper. So I wasn't expecting a nice hard edge, but I think that's very beautiful. All right, don't want to spill this, so I'm going to put that back. Let's keep going. So we started with our lightest lights, moving into our darkest darks. We actually went pretty dark and then to a medium here, so I'm going to want that to dry before I kind of go back in and do this area, because I do want to keep the hard edge around the flower. So in that case, let's go ahead and finish that edge. So we have, just rotate my reference image for you here as well. You can see we just ended here. We're going to keep going over until we finish this. So you can really just use your brush to draw that line if you're not seeing it anymore, if you've lost it underneath your wash. And then we're going to fill in some more darkness here. Let's grab the purple black color. I think I really do want that to dry first. So we're going to move up here. We've got this color coming in this area. Coming up here. Coming around. So let me know what you think about these colors. And the only one I was like really surprised about was the blue. I really thought it was going to be more like maybe like a cerulean blue or some type of sky blue, but it was more of an aqua. So other than that, these seem to perform really well, just like the other box that I had opened. They're granulating well, which I love. We're going to do some more blending with our midtones. A lot of these darker areas are harder edges. Alright, we'll just keep going with that. This was a bit of an experiment on this side. I think we'll still come back and put maybe some more of the dark purple there. Once it dries, I think we'll also be able to fix it a little bit just because we need to put in this dark value. So let's move on to right around this. Oops. Luckily, that's not too far off from where I wanted to put it, but that was not intentional. All right, so we're going to start at the top of this one here, so that darkness kind of starts around here. And goes up. And goes all the way around that petal, but we do have like a little bit of it connecting over here. I have a hard time seeing all of my reference lines, but just kind of looking back and forth at my image. Continuing around the flower, so this edge kind of goes around as well. You notice I rotate my page a lot. That's just so I don't put my hand in any wet paint. But when I do that, I also rotate my reference image. So I have a better idea what I'm looking at from the same angle. Okay, so some dark color coming down here. We'll do a little bit of blending with that in a bit. This color really is close to that Misty Carmine. I feel like it's a little more on the purple side from their other set of these granulating colors. Okay, and we've got this coming all the way around. So I think I'll try to just put in a thin line as a guideline, then I'll go back in and thicken it up. Dry brush here. Really trying to not use too thick of a consistency because they are so dark, but it does appear like it takes, once they dry, it does take, they're more transparent. It's going to take multiple layers to really like get that darkness. So I'm going to try to be a little less worried about that. Right, and now I've got some coming down here. It's a nice hard edge. I still got a pretty small brush doing some of these detail work, but this area I think I'll need to do a little bit more blending up there. I might grab a larger brush. And I also want to like blend this with the purple again, but I don't know how well I love what happened over there. And maybe with another layer it will look alright. Yeah, I'm going to grab a little bit bigger brush. This is a 6. So this is a pretty thin dark line here. I put down a pretty thick line because I want to blend it out a little bit. So I just have clean water on my brush, going in, getting really close to that line, and then just kind of blending this out. Still want to keep an eye on my reference because you can see this lighter version of the color really stops and turns into a highlight, so I don't want to mess up that highlight. But I also don't want it to be a nice hard edge like that either. So once I've got this down, again, I'm going to rinse off my brush. I'm going to dry it a lot more. So I've got a clean damp brush, and I'm just going to like wiggle the brush just a little bit. I call this scrubbing right at the edge to soften the edge. And so I'm not trying to get the paint to move very much or very far. It's just to soften that edge so that this doesn't feel so unnatural. Okay. And then for fun, we're going to go ahead and, you can see in my palette that purple and pink are really starting to separate. This is a much more purpley section, so we'll just see again how well these blend together. Bring that up here. And this purple's starting to granulate. It almost looks like the texture of like leather. This part's much darker, so I'm trying to just kind of shift some of that darker pigment over and lighten up the area that where I laid the purple. Without it getting very muddy, it does feel like it's getting a bit muddy, which I think is just, there must be black in that purple. So I'm going to grab some more of that lighter purple and just try to fill that area back in. And it looks a little dark to me, but I know it's going to dry later. All right. like we can probably come back over here and grab that smaller brush again just to get my outline. And go straight from the tube here. This is one of my darkest darks, so I'm trying to leave it pretty well pigmented. That goes off the page here. Brush got too dry there. You need a small brush. You do need to load and reload quite a bit. Alright, so now I'm going to get that hard edge down and then go switch to the bigger brush. And also just kind of marking where that blend is. Alright, so going back to my number 6, just going to go for it. This is more of a blend here, so we're just going to kind of paint up to that line and then go in with some clean water in a moment. Soften the edge. Maybe even should have grabbed a slightly bigger brush. I did drop a little bit of water right there. Blot that up before it causes any problems. Alright, so I'm rinsing off my brush, again going with, kind of dry it off a little bit, and then we're just going in here to soften. Maybe we'll need a little more water. The darker color does seem to like move a little bit more. It doesn't seem it's staining as the lighter purple, like a more bright purple. There you go. Get a nice blend there. Just like we're seeing in our reference. Then I'll let that, actually before I let that dry, I do want to get a little bit of a like blend, just kind of like a halo around this little curve. So in order to do that, we're just going to do that same thing. Just kind of wet up right around the outside of it. You can see in my reference, I've got kind of a blend there. And it is more of that purple color, so I'm going to grab a little bit of it. I'm sorry, they're both purples. We got blue purple and black purple. I'm just going to kind of drop some of it right there. Around that dark spot. And then when we go in with our next wash, we'll add in some more color, but just using my clean brush to soften the halo edge I put there just now. Okay. So now we'll continue on with our darks. I'm seeing some darkness here that we haven't got yet, and still some more in the center. Definitely seeing, like, when I go back to my palette, this color is more purple, and then once I mix it back up, I'm seeing the black kind of come back to life in my mix. I'm trying to find my reference points. just painting what I see in my reference, because you know I've treated the image. It's just a flat wash, so that's what I'm going to paint here. I don't want this flower to be like completely realistic. It's going to be stylized, but it should have the qualities of a realistic looking flower. Alright, and then seeing this hard edge here. If you're holding your brush, trying to get these really light lines, you can do a vertical hold. That's important that you're not pressing very hard. You want to like make sure your brush is just barely touching the paper to get that type of an edge. I also want to make sure that this edge is coming through and matching up here. Here, and I think this as well. Again, having a little bit of trouble finding my lines, but that's all right. I've got great reference here. And then this hard edge is going to come up and meet that. Go. Still using a pretty small brush. And see how much darker this is when it goes on versus when it dries. And I mean, that's just the nature of watercolor as well, where it's always going to dry a lot lighter. I think with these, because they go on so dark, you're just kind of surprised at how light they are when they dry. Okay, got darkness there. Looking to see what we might have missed. So we'll put right over here. Gonna get that glow going with this as well. And I think it's a good time now to add some more of this dark back in. I'm really just kind of like blotting my brush to try to get that same type of placement with the color. Not doing anything fancy here with this technique, just kind of bouncing my brush around to try to mimic what I'm seeing in the photo. And then once I get a little bit closer to where there's more of a wash, I'll switch to my bigger brush. I'm getting a little low on paint here, so I'll reload that here in a bit as well. I don't know if you use Paul Rubens. I mean, they didn't pay me to make this video or anything like that. But I really, really do like their products. And this is now my second kind of like small set of paints from them. And I have really enjoyed the other set. And so, oof, dropping my brush. So far, I think I'm going to enjoy these. I love like getting new colors and thinking of, ooh, I wonder what I can paint with that. And so when the paints themselves inspire me, I really like when that happens. And it seems to happen with these. Alright, so I'm going back, looking, I do have another dark line I want to put in around here. So going back to my small brush now, the number 2. Oh, I was going to put in a little bit more paint. So this is the dark one, 151. And here are the colors that came in this palette. We're using the 161 purple blue and the 151 purple and black. So this is the 151. I'm going to put a little bit more of that in my palette. Really great deal on these two. Like the 15 milliliter tubes were priced well enough that I was surprised when they came because I thought I was getting 5 milliliter tubes, but it was 15. Now I'm gonna, kind of looking back over here is where I put down the darker purple, and then we layered the lighter purple on top of it. And I think we even tried the fluid there, and that really looks really pretty interesting. I think with these you like the granulating texture, but if you want some other areas to be smoother, I think that's really a great use case for the watercolor medium that came with the paints. So going back in here, I'm going to rotate this a little bit. Just using the tip of my brush to get down that initial thin line. Both looking at my reference and trying to find my reference lines in the sketch. And it does kind of just blend up a little bit. Here. And then I feel like this is going to come out a little bit too. I kind of want to go over some of the darks, but I also want to see how well these might layer if I maybe put another wash of the bright purple on top. So painting something like this, it's a lot of fun, but it does take some patience because you'll notice I can't really paint one thing if it's next to something else that's still drying. But I think we've got most of our dark bits in. Now is a good time to do some more wet on wet blending with the purple. So we've kind of got our highlight areas established. We've got the darkest parts in. We're going to, try to make those a little less obvious. But now I want to use this pink purple color, or purple blue rather, to build up some of our midtones. So I think what we'll do here is a mix, we'll wet on dry, but then use some water for blending. That way we're not going to run into any issues losing our highlights. So I'm just going to kind of start over on the right hand side here. Again, watching my reference, trying to mimic the shape of the colors that I'm seeing. And just mix up nice kind of watery wash. And just use this, and you can definitely use just the paint to create some of these dark and light areas because it layers so well. You can see it's the same color, but I just went in with some water to just kind of move the pigment around, and it definitely is kind of staying where you put it. So that's really great for wet on wet painting if you're doing like interesting backgrounds or doing an underpainting and you want your paint to move, but you want it to still, maintain its form. All right, so I think that's very pretty. Gonna use a bit of a clean wet brush to soften here. My water is pretty purple at this point, but I think it'll be okay. This was a nice soft blend here into a highlight. The purple doesn't move a lot once you put it down. As far as like being able to reactivate, not saying that it does that so well. It doesn't seem to lift that great. So again, just probably a characteristic of this color. Nothing wrong with it. It's just keep that in mind as you're painting with it, that You're probably not going to want to do a lot of like lifting. But I think that's really turning out very pretty. Almost kind of looks like a galaxy sky or something like that. So let's keep on. I'm going to wet up this area where I'm going to put the next section of paint. Darker up at the top, so I'm going to apply the water, or the paint rather, up toward the top and then blend it down. Still keeping some of the highlight. We're a lot more like transparent over here. Again, kind of turning into a really light highlight. So again, for that highlight, gonna use some clean water just to soften that edge. I think I want to go in with a little bit more pigment up here. I'm just looking at the shapes in my image, trying to make the same shapes on paper. Just as I suspected, these do really layer pretty well. So the pink or the purple blue on top of the darker purple black ends up looking pretty nice. All right, and so we also got an area over here that's not quite white. So I'm just gonna have a really watery wash of that, and then I'm gonna drop in some on the side. I think I do want to drop some around this. And around the edges of that petal. While it's still wet, I do seem to be able to lift pretty well with a damp brush. Definitely a lot of granulation with the blends. So let's move down here. And my water now is kind of tinted purple, so it's almost great for just laying down a nice clean wash and then dropping in color. This petal goes all the way down here. I think it will actually. I'm going to stop here and then go back around for the bottom petal. Okay. You got to mix this back up though. It's definitely separating into like, this is purple and blue, but it almost looks like pink and blue. My palette here. Now that it's nice and wet, I'll just, again, I'm gonna drop that in. It looks really dark, but this color has been drying much lighter, so I'm not that worried about it. I'm looking a little bit here as well that will go back and blend. Barely touching the concentrated area of color, so it kind of creates a soft edge without moving too much. These do pretty well with that technique so far. And then I'm gonna go ahead. I've got a pretty wet brush, and I've just dragged some of that pigment. It's almost like it kind of looks like a one-stroke painting effect, keeping that nice blend against the edge of that top petal. I do have a highlight coming down here, so I'm just gonna get there and stop. I'm going to play around with this a little bit. I'll get everything wet but this highlight, and now I want to drop in some color to make some of this curved petal. So again, this has been kind of staying put when I'm dropping it wet and wet, so I think it'll do pretty good at this. And it is. I do think that I'll need to go blend that highlight area with some clean water before it dries. Otherwise, I know the color probably won't lift. So now, what do you guys think about, let me know in the comments, like, what do you think about using these two colors together? I might try this again with just one. I really liked, if you check out my YouTube channel, there's another video where I unboxed the first of these, but then in a following video I painted monochromatic watercolor rose, and I used the Misty Carmine, just one pigment, and I think it turned out really, really well and beautiful. I don't know how I feel about mixing these two for something. This is very similar, but I end up using two pigments. I guess we'll end up seeing how it turns out. But if you're interested, check out that other video. Just gonna try to blend this a little bit more. It's definitely separating. This is another area that, let's go ahead and try this fluid. Where it's not blending quite like I want it to, but I think that's the point of this ox fluid that they provided. I think I went in with too much pigment, so I'm just going to lift what I can and then kind of start over up here. I'm going to put that initially down. I thought, oh, it's not going to be that big deal. It might not dry that dark, but gosh, these do dry pretty dark, so. I think we're also ready to fill in this back petal. I've got some highlights here as well, so I'm going to go in first with some water. And we'll drop in the color. So here, I think I want to lift a highlight. The colors are starting to dry. Let me see if I can lift any of this edge here. Maybe a little. Now I want to go in and get the dark bits in here before we do a wash for the midtones. Now this is the point where I normally just start kind of going back and forth and fiddling. I've got kind of each area painted. It's all about the values I want. I think that, but now I'm looking, I think our darks should be a little bit darker and maybe a little bit softer, so we'll try to do that. But a couple places where I was hoping it would blend a little bit more, I'm getting a lot more granulation. So I think that's probably just the paints. But if I go back in, I am able to kind of move it around. So I think that's kind of helpful trying to form this petal inside the other one. But I don't know how thrilled I am about some of the washes. So in the granulating paints, you either really like them, or I think it's more about application for me, like style you're going for. But I think we definitely need some more darks. So we're gonna go back to the black purple and just start adding another layer. You'll be able to see this time how dark this dries. And going with a much thicker wash. Last time the outline definitely stayed pretty dark, but when I filled in, not so much, so I'm going to try a thicker wash all around. Get a little bit of edge there. So again, here you can choose if you want this to be more of a gradient blend or if you want texture. We kind of went with the texture over here, so I'm going to just kind of do something similar. I'm just bouncing my brush a little bit to try to mimic what I'm seeing, leaving a little bit of white space instead of making it a soft blend like in some of the other places. Same thing in some of these areas where some of the petals meet our darks, or some of the light areas meet our darks. Same thing, just kind of stippling my brush, trying to create a little bit of that texture. And just anywhere I see darks, doing a second layer. Hoping this area is not too wet. Was a little wet here. I'm just going to sop that up. Same thing over here. Doing a stippling just over what I did before. I'm using a pretty thick consistency of paint here to get the dark value right off the bat. Like this one's going to dry a little bit lighter than some of the other areas I just painted. We've got this little spot poking out over here. So yeah, definitely, I mean, we had a little too much water over here, but definitely realizing that these darks will definitely all be needing a second coat, but it's getting a lot closer to the values I see in my reference. I'm gonna flip it over. Go back in here for our darkest darks. It's a little bit wet, so I'm not going to go all the way over yet. I'm going to give that time to dry. So it was definitely a little wet over here, as I suspected. So hopefully the rest of that color won't move very much while the rest of it dries. Use that technique over here too. I want that to dry. Alright, so while this part's drying, I'm just kind of looking around at the purple areas. I think I want to do some more kind of wet into wet blending there, but just kind of checking back and forth at all my darks, aside from this area that's still too wet. And I think we've got everything pretty well there, in and close to what we see in the reference photo. Would like to see a few more areas maybe darkened up a bit more, but and give this a little bit of time to keep drying while we move on to some purple. And check out the palette again. We're seeing like so much of that separation. It's really pretty. Almost want to just kind of play with wet washes and like dropping color into water and things like that, just to see. Okay, so I'm going to try to start laying this down, just where I'm seeing areas where I still don't have that mid-tone dark enough. I'm kind of okay that I'm touching the wet darkest dark value, just because it'll help it blend a little bit. Over here, just put a little bit more water on my brush. Again, just watching what's in the photo. It's like when I have an area like this and we want to make sure that that's a lot lighter. Again, just clean water. Well, my water's purple at this point, but just water on the brush and then do some blending. And if your water was tinted, kind of like mine was, you can, you know, lift and get some of your highlight back. So I've just got a little bit of a paper towel here, and I can lift some of that and still get a nice gradient wash. So some of the darker purple, I kind of want to do some of that stippling now. Or sorry, with a darker wash of this purple, some of that stippling like we did with the purple black. And then maybe we'll do a wash over that. Same thing over here. Again, I'm not trying to be photorealistic. I'm not trying to paint it perfect, but you know, this is a good practice to try to like use the paints to mimic what you see. And I'm honestly not even looking at it as a flower at this point. I'm just kind of looking at it as a collection of shapes and values. So now I'm looking at this petal and just realizing this needs to be a little bit more purple. Put a little bit darker values in here. And then go in with a light wash and we should get a nice blend. Putting in the light wash and then just going right up to where I put in the darker color, and it should mix enough to blend, but not so much that you're going to lose too much of the initial darkness you put down. But if you do, just go back in and kind of just tap in more color. And down here we've got a little bit more. I was trying to be very cautious about leaving in my highlights because I knew that we were using some staining colors. This is giving me a lot of flexibility now with being able to build up layers, which also adds depth to your paintings. Okay, this is light enough. I think we're going to go in with like a nice wet wash of this purple just because these highlight areas aren't perfectly white. Kind of give us some more of the values that we're looking for. And we'll lift it a bit, but again, since that purple is kind of staining, it's not really moving too much. We'll just build that area up with some more layers. So now that we are painting on top of already dried paint, you really, a light wash on top of a light wash is going to make, you know, kind of a medium value color. So you're not having to, you know, mix a dark wash on top of another light wash. They are going to, the colors are going to layer and mix to each other, mix together, and make different values and also different colors. Like you can glaze one color over and you notice we're going to get a different color and value when we like mix the two pigments we've got here together. But again, we still need some of this to dry. I'm just going to try to move around some of this pigment so that we don't get a really hard edge while this tries to keep drying. And then this is not perfectly white in reference, definitely lighter. So I'm just using water to kind of activate the paint that's already there and like kind of fill in the area a bit. Okay, then now that that's started to dry, I'll do another wash right here. You see I'm layering the color on top of a color, so you're still seeing what I put down before, but I was able to darken up both bits. Alright, now kind of looking over here, we've definitely got some more of this purple. Again, just a damp brush there. Since I'm waiting for the purple to dry, I figure I might as well go ahead and do some of the wet on wet layering. We definitely have a hard edge here though, and I want that to be softer. So let's see if we can't put some of it down, maybe let it sit for a second, and then do a blend. Same thing here, we need to blend. Getting close to being finished, so you know, so I'm like kind of laying down paint and then letting it sit and then going back and blending where I've got my highlight areas. Just getting the paint will stain a bit, and that's actually helping me get a nice transition. I think I'll go back into the center of this flower. That one might not be dry enough quite yet. I still think we need to darken up these. It almost dries a little bit chalky also. That's probably not. I might have a hard edge, but I'm getting a little impatient, so I might pull out my heat tool just to dry things up a little bit more quickly. Still want things to be a little bit darker, but I think it just, you know, when the paint dries, it's a little bit almost like matte and like chalky a little bit, but it's definitely a lot more transparent than when it goes down. So I think that's just what we're probably going to end up with, and that's okay. I think these definitely have their place in my palette. Alright, so here in a moment I'm going to pull up my heat tool. YouTube might block out the noise. If not, maybe you can turn your volume down just a bit for a moment. And then we'll be able to kind of finish up the center here and finalize this flower. So that's done. I think a lot of these darks have a lot of nice crisp edges. So before we do our last layer of darks, I am going to do just a little bit more of the bright purple color. Again, as that dried, still seeing that I still have a few areas that could be a bit darker. So I've got my number 8 brush. Sticking with the purple color, I'm going to do maybe kind of a medium wash. We'll try to make it really watery as we kind of move and blend it around, but here I'm just, again, going to darken up areas to the values I see in my reference. Just that clean water blending. Here we've got to bring in some more, probably more pigmented version of this color. Get that center of the flower. Wonder how dark the darkest of this purple will dry. I got a highlight there. I do want to preserve it. I'm getting a nice blend, so I just kind of covered it up, and then I'm going to try to lift it a little bit with my brush. There we go. got this highlight here, which I did leave in white. Can I come in what I usually do, which is not leave enough white space, but I'm just going to try with my smaller brush to lift that out as well. Yeah, I'm realizing these colors are not great for lifting. I don't really want to damage my paper. I don't know if I scrub at it anymore, if it's gonna come up, so. We definitely need a little bit more drama over here on the left. I think over here I'm going to kind of wet up the area. It's purple and then start dropping in some color. And just kind of let it blend. Nice dark area here. Okay, now over here is kind of moving a little bit. I'm going with more of a medium wash and start blending. Moving some of the color around. It's already down with some clean water. And I want to make sure we still get a nice blend to the highlight. Just kind of adjusting as I'm watching it dry. Same thing here. Some more blend. I wish we got a better blend over here. Kind of dried before we got to it. Maybe a little bit more color over here. Alright, so now I'm going to use my heat tool one more time. So again, if you want to put it on mute, go ahead and actually take that back real quick. I'm going to darken up the center because that's where I want to use the heat tool. But I want this to be a little bit more dramatic. Now when I use the heat tool, as things dry more quickly with the heat tool, you won't get as much of like the gradual blending, but just something to keep in mind. So kind of like look at it on camera and realizing, oh, my darks need to be a little bit darker. And that was like instant, that did not want to lift. Okay, so go ahead and dry this real quick one last time before we do the final wash of darks. And then I think we'll call it a painting. So I think it's dry enough now that we can put in our final line work. So you look at this color, the darker color, it's definitely granulating into like a light pink, like almost like a light magenta. It mixes back with the black once you activate it. So that's pretty interesting that it's definitely separating into more of like a pinky purple. Right, so now I'm going to go in here with all these hard edges. A little bit over what I did last time, just because I know it'll be a little bit lighter, and it's kind of another value I can add in there. think if I did this painting again, I would probably just stick with one pigment. I think it would be really beautiful to see the colors, like one of these colors just granulate into its lightest to darkest. But overall, I like the aesthetic of this piece. It's an interesting way to try out these colors from Paul Rubens. Get a little bit of a bigger brush. This really didn't dry very even. See if another coat will help. So there we are. We unboxed these Shiyun watercolors from Paul Rubens, all 6 colors. We even swatched them. I find my swatch paper here. After putting them in the palette here. And now we even went ahead and gave these a try with brand new watercolor painting. Overall, nope, it's not the color I thought was on that brush. I was just trying to fix a little muddied up spot here, no big deal. I think that these definitely have their purpose. I don't know if I love this painting, but maybe you let me know what you think in the comments. Should I try out some more of these type of paints? I typically use Winsor Newton. And I don't know, thought I'd try something new. I feel like I could also mess with this flower all night if people are willing to watch. So let's go ahead and just give it one more quick dry, and then we'll take off the tape and see our final results. Alright, I think that's dry, and I do want to show you the other one that I did. Just a few things that I have tried with some layerable granulating watercolor. So this is one approach, this rose flower. I've also done this where you take an image and you just turn it into 3 values, and I painted this with Daniel Smith's Moon Glow, which is also, you know, granulating color. And then this one, with the last set of Paul Rubens paints, there was a color, Misty Carmine. So I used that to paint this rose, which I do have a video of on my channel if you want to check that out. I'll post a link. But my favorite part is always pulling off the tape. And there we go. Thanks for joining my first YouTube live. If you liked learning with me, or painting with me rather, check out my channel to watch some of my tutorials for beginners and other time-lapse paintings. Thanks and have a great day. Happy painting.